Just picture this, a modern jetliner, top-tier airline, really experienced crew. They're coming into land, busy city below, and then somehow the plane just flies straight into a mountain. How does that even happen? Especially in 1995 with all the tech we had then. Today we are taking a deep dive into that exact event, the tragic crash of American Airlines Flight 965, December 20th, 1995, near Cali, Colombia. And our mission really is to unpack this just incredible, almost unbelievable chain of events. The errors, the misunderstandings that just kept piling up. We'll look at how pilots interact with automation, how people make decisions under serious pressure, and ultimately how this one crash really changed aviation safety forever. It was just devastating. 159 people lost their lives up on that dark mountain, El Diluvio. Only 4 survivors, remarkably. And the really striking thing, it wasn't the plane. No mechanical failure here. It was confusion, a kind of fog in the cockpit, a complete loss of awareness. So to understand how such a decorated crew could get so lost, we need to have set the scene a bit.
Right. Colombia in 95, it wasn't an easy place to fly. You had the civil conflict, drug cartels, infrastructure wasn't great. Air travel could be genuinely risky. The national airline had, a pretty bad safety record back then. So for Colombian Americans traveling, American Airlines felt like the safe, modern option. Reliable. That perception was huge.
And the plane itself, the Boeing 757, that was considered pretty advanced for the time, yeah. What was special about it? And how did American prep its pilots for these specific South American routes?
Oh yeah, the 757 was definitely next gen then. It had the glass cockpit, lots of screens, and this advanced flight management system, the FMS, with GPS integrated. And American Airlines, they absolutely did specific training for South America. They warned pilots explicitly. High mountains, like over 20,000 feet. No radar at airports like Cali, that's a big one. ATC flying blind, basically. Plus potential language barriers with controllers. They told the pilots, flat out, you need the highest level of situational awareness.
Highest level of situational awareness. That phrase just hangs there, doesn't it, considering what happened? And the crew, really top-notch. Captain Nicholas Tafuri, 57 tons of hours, 13,000, perfect record. First Officer Don Williams, 5,800 hours, former Air Force Instructor of the Year. These guys knew what they were doing.
Absolutely. And, beyond the flight deck, this was a very human flight. Most passengers were Colombian Americans, first or second generation, heading home for Christmas. Lots of families, kids, even the flight attendants. All 6 were Colombian born, also going home for the holidays. It just adds another layer to the tragedy.
So the flight starts, but not smoothly. It was delayed leaving Miami, right? By a couple of hours.
Yeah, 2 hours late, there was a big snowstorm up in the Northeast, messing everything up. A Tower Air 747 actually slid off the runway at JFK that day. So right away, there's this subtle pressure, maybe unspoken, to make up time.
That pressure. You can see how that might start influencing decisions later. So the original plan for landing in Cali, it involved flying past the airport first.
That's right, an ILS approach to runway 01. They'd fly over some radio beacons, TULUA, then Rosso using the FMS to navigate. Then they'd turn back around to land. And crucially remember, no radar at Cali. It had been destroyed by guerrillas, so ATC is completely relying on the pilots telling them where they are, passing those beacons.
Okay, so Captain Tafuri makes contact with Cali approach. He's about 63 miles out. What's the first thing ATC tells him?
The controller clears them direct to Cali VOR, descend and maintain 15,000 feet, and then adds, report to Lua VOR, and this is where the wires get crossed. Big time.
How so? Direct to Cali VOR sounds straightforward.
Well, yeah, in the U.S., it usually means you can cut corners, ignore the intermediate points like TULUA, just head straight for the Cali Econ. But in South America, and especially with no radar, direct to Cali VOR meant follow the entire published route to the VOR, including hitting TULU and Rosso. Those reporting points were the controller's only way to track their progress down the valley.
Ah, okay. So Tafuri thinking like a U.S. pilot.
Exactly. He immediately punched direct Cali into the FMS. Poof. TULUA and Rosso vanished from the flight plan display. He even says to the first officer something like, I put direct Cali for you in there. Just like that, key navigation points were gone from their primary display.
Wow. Okay, so they've lost those waypoints on the screen. Then what happens?
Then, just a minute later, the controller throws them a curveball, offers runway 19. It's a straight-in approach. Winds are calm.
And the pilots jump on it, right? Thinking they can save time.
They accept immediately. You can almost hear the relief, thinking, great, we can make up some time here. But here's the thing. They were arguably way too high and too close to the airport at that point to realistically switch to a straight-in approach for runway 19. That pressure to hurry, it really shows there. They didn't seem to fully assess if the switch was actually feasible.
Okay, so they've accepted runway 19. Big change. But didn't the controller mention TOLUA again?
He did. The new clearance was for the VOR DME approach to runway 19er, Rosso number 1 arrival, report to Lua VOR.
And to Furry's reaction.
He sounds genuinely surprised. The CVR picks him up saying, I gotta give you TOLUA first of all. They scramble to pull out the approach chart for runway 19, the Rosso arrival. Tefuri then realizes, yeah, see, that comes off TOUA. TOLUA was still the starting point.
So they know they need TOLUA, but it's not on their FMS anymore because he had gone direct to Cali earlier.
Correct. Confusion is building. And now comes a really, really critical error. Unsure exactly where they are relative to TOUA, Tefuri asks ATC, can we go direct to Rosso and then do the Rosso arrival? Basically asking to skip TOUA.
And the controller?
The controller, Nelson Rivera, his English wasn't great. He couldn't really explain why that wasn't okay, that they needed to pass TOLUA first for spacing and alignment. So he just says, affirmative.
Oh no. So he confirms their incorrect plan.
He confirms their incorrect assumption. And now Tefuri tries to put Rosso into the FMS. He types in just the letter R.
Just R, not Rosso.
Just R. Now, here's a horrible piece of FMS design, or maybe data entry protocol. In Colombia, there were 2 navigation beacons whose identifier started with R and could be brought up just by typing R. There was Rosso, the one they wanted, near Cali, but the FMS database listed another one first because it was closer alphabetically or geographically in the database lookup, maybe. It was Romeo. Romeo Beacon was near Bogota, 132 miles away, completely in the wrong direction, back towards the Andes.
So the FMS shows our options, and Romeo is the first one listed.
Exactly. And Tefuri likely rushed, maybe flustered, trying to reprogram the approach quickly. He selects the top item, Romeo. He hits enter. He's just told the multi-million-dollar autopilot to turn the plane around and fly 132 miles northeast towards the mountains they were supposed to be avoiding.
And the display. What did the pilots see on their screens?
This is chilling. The magenta line, the programmed flight path, immediately redraws itself on their navigation display. It shows this huge sweeping left turn heading away from Cali, back towards Bogota and the mountains. It's a massive deviation right there on the screen.
And they didn't notice, or they didn't comment on it.
For a crucial period, neither pilot seems to react to this glaringly wrong flight path on the display. This is that children of the magenta phenomenon we mentioned. It's like they were so focused on programming the box, they stopped looking at what the box was telling them. They trusted the line implicitly, even when it was visibly wrong.
So they're turning left, away from Cali, towards the mountains, and descending. They're completely lost.
Utterly lost. All their reference points are gone. The first officer, Don Williams, finally voices the confusion. You hear him ask, where are we? Captain Tefuri is trying to find TOLU again, fumbling with its code, even though it's on the chart in front of him. The disorientation is palpable.
Then there's another turn.
Yes, a second fatal turn. Williams seems to realize the FMS is commanding this left turn back towards TOLUA, or where the FMS thought TOUA should be relative to Romeo, perhaps. He starts turning left, maybe trying to follow the program path, flawed as it was, but Tefuri snaps, nah, hell no. He overrides him, tells Williams to turn right towards where he thinks Cali should be. They are now flying down a valley parallel to the correct one, way off course to the east, and still descending fast 2,700 feet per minute.
And the controller? Can't he see they're lost?
He can't see them on radar, remember, but he can hear the confusion. He notices they report being 38 miles from Cali, then 2 minutes later they're still reporting 38 miles out. He knows something's wrong, they must have looped or turned away. He tries to ask about their position, their altitude, but again, the language barrier. He basically just repeats, you can landed runway 19er, you can use runway 19er, trying to be helpful, but not conveying the urgency or the specific information needed.
And then, the alarm.
Yeah. Suddenly, the cockpit is filled with the sound. Terrain, pull up. The ground proximity warning system, the GPWS. It detected the rapidly rising terrain ahead.
What did the pilots do?
Williams reacted instantly. He clicked off the autopilot, slammed the thrust levers to full power, and hauled back on the control column, pulling the nose up sharply. The stick shaker went off. That's a violent shaking of the controls, warning of an impending stall. You can hear passengers screaming on the CVR. It was a desperate, maximum effort climb.
They were trying everything to climb over it.
Everything they were trained to do in that specific GPWS escape maneuver drill. But there was one critical thing they missed. One step not in the memorized procedure.
The speed brakes.
The speed brakes. They had extended them earlier to help slow down and descend faster when they accepted runway 19. In the heat of the moment, reacting to the GPWS alarm following their training, they forgot to retract them. Investigators calculated it later. If they had retracted those speed brakes, just flicked the lever within 1 second of starting that pull-up move,
So it would have cleared the mountain?
they would have had just enough extra climb performance to clear the summit of El Diluvio. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
1 second later.
1 second after the stick shaker activated, American Flight 965 slammed into the dark mountainside at 9,000 feet.
Just devastating. But amidst all that horror, there were survivors. 4 people actually made it.
It's incredible, isn't it? A true miracle. Mercedes Ramirez, Mauricio Reyes, Gonzalo Dusan, and his little 6-year-old daughter, Michelle. They were thrown clear, injured, freezing in the wreckage overnight, but they were alive when rescuers finally reached the incredibly remote site. Tragically, Gonzalo Dusan's 13-year-old son, Gonzalo Jr., was also found alive initially, but died from his injuries shortly after rescue. And they even found a dog still in its kennel, basically unharmed. Just randomness of survival and such a violent impact.
Incredible survival stories. So, okay, we've seen the sequence, the errors piling up. Let's dig into the why. The CVR showed 7.5 minutes of, as investigators put it, impenetrable fog of confusion. How did it get to that point?
It really comes down to a complex mix of human factors and the way they interacted with the automation. That children of the magenta idea is key. Warren Vanderberg, an American Airlines instructor, coined it. Pilots had become so reliant, maybe over-reliant, on following that magenta line on the FMS, they were trained to trust it almost implicitly. And while Tafuri and Williams were hugely experienced, this reliance was deeply ingrained through the training culture of the 80s and early 90s. It wasn't incompetence, it was how they were taught to operate these complex jets.
And the FMS itself, it wasn't perfect. We talked about the waypoint issue.
Exactly. When Tafuri went direct to Cali, those crucial intermediate points like TLUA just vanished from the active flight plan. A known issue. Honeywell, the maker, apparently knew about it, had a software fix for newer planes, but it hadn't been retrofitted onto this particular 757.
That seems negligent almost.
Hindsight is 20/20, but yes. And then the R versus Rosso thing, typing a single letter and getting a waypoint hundreds of miles away because it was first on the list. That's not intuitive database design, especially for pilots under pressure using standard paper charts that just showed Rosso. Why allow single letter entry if it could create such ambiguity?
So technology flaws definitely played a role. What about the pilot's own decision-making? Cognitive biases?
Oh, absolutely. Accepting runway 19, for instance. That seems driven by that time pressure we mentioned, plus maybe familiarity bias, thinking we've managed tight approaches before, we can do this. They didn't seem to stop and calculate, hang on, are we physically able to descend and slow down enough from this altitude and distance?
And once they were on that path, they stuck with it, even as things went wrong.
That's plan continuation bias. It's a powerful human tendency. Once you're committed to a course of action, it's really hard to admit it's failing and change, especially in a high-stakes environment. The book's solution would have been, okay, we're confused, we're losing situational awareness, let's climb to a safe altitude, circle, sort this out. But they kept trying to fix the FMS to make the flawed plan work instead of reverting to basic, safe flying. They didn't want to admit defeat, maybe.
And Tafuri's interpretation of direct to Cali, that U.S.-centric view, despite the specific South America training.
That was a huge initial misstep. Plus, the approach charts they were using for Cali were pretty basic. No terrain shading, no contour lines. Better charts existed, showing the mountains more clearly. Did Tafuri, having only flown there at night, really have a good mental map of the terrain? Investigators speculated he might have been so tunnel visioned on the FMS that, as one report put it, he never thought about the mountains at all, which is terrifying.
Especially in the Andes. There's a history there, isn't there? Like that eastern crash in Bolivia.
Exactly. Flying in the Andes demands constant terrain awareness. Navigational errors there have catastrophic consequences. You'd think that history would sharpen focus, but maybe the automation created a false sense of security.
So the crash sends shockwaves. What were the biggest lessons learned? That speed brake detail is just agonizing.
It really is, because retracting them wasn't part of the standard, memorized GPWS escape drill. It was an extra step, easily forgotten under extreme stress. It immediately led to calls to change procedures and even redesign automation. Like, should the plane automatically retract speed brakes if the pilot commands full takeoff ground power? Airbus planes, with their fly-by-wire systems, already did something similar. It raised that whole question. How much should the plane protect pilots from themselves?
And the fact that they seem to repeat mistakes from other crashes, like that Thai Airways flight into Kathmandu.
Yeah, the parallels were chilling. FMS confusion, navigation errors, flying into mountains despite warnings. Tafuri and Williams had likely studied the Thai crash as part of their training, yet they ended up in a terrifyingly similar situation. It really highlighted how easily even the best can fall into these traps.
It also kind of dismisses simpler explanations some might look for, like toxic fumes or something incapacitating them.
Right. The CVR makes it clear they were conscious and trying, but deeply confused. It reinforces that these psychological pitfalls, the interaction with technology, they are real risks for any crew. Remember that American Airlines near miss in Connecticut just a month before? They hit trees on approach. If it could happen there, it could certainly happen in a place like Cali with fewer safety nets.
So it boiled down to two main areas needing big improvements. Right. Understanding automation better and better warning systems.
Precisely. On the automation front, the training emphasis shifted. It became, when in doubt, simplify. Drop down a level of automation, click off the autopilot, hand fly the airplane. Don't try complex FMS programming when you're lost and heading towards terrain at night. Basic airmanship has to come first. That needed to be hammered home even harder.
And the warning systems themselves, that led to EGPWS.
Yes, enhanced GPWS. And the story behind it is amazing. It was driven by the same engineer who invented the original GPWS, a guy named Don Bateman at Honeywell. And get this, after the Soviet Union collapsed, Bateman apparently bought a secret, highly detailed digital map database of global terrain on the black market.
No way. Seriously.
That's the story. He used that incredibly detailed terrain data as the foundation for eGPWS. Instead of just looking straight down like the old GPWS, eGPWS uses the plane's GPS position and compares it against this worldwide terrain database. It can look ahead, predict potential collisions over a minute in advance, and it generates a map display for the pilots, showing nearby terrain in color green for below, yellow for close, red for danger. Massive improvement in situational awareness.
So pilots could actually see the mountains on a screen relative to their position.
Exactly. It cuts right through the kind of disorientation Flight 965 experienced. Airlines were a bit slow at first, another expensive box, but after Cali, the value was undeniable. American was among the first to sign up. The FAA mandated it, now called TAWS Terrain Awareness and Warning Systems by the late 90s, fully rolled out by 2002.
And the impact?
Huge. TAWS has drastically reduced what we call CFIT-controlled flight into terrain accidents worldwide. It's probably saved thousands of lives by providing that clear, unambiguous warning when crews get confused or lose awareness. It's technology directly addressing a known human failing.
Wow. So Flight 965, it's just such a sobering story, isn't it? A stark reminder of how even the best crews, decades of safe flying, can fall victim to this complex interplay of factors: human error, automation dependence, cognitive biases, communication breakdowns. It all lined up in the worst possible way. I think the biggest takeaway for anyone working with complex systems, not just pilots, is that feeling of, that could never happen to me. This story shows it absolutely can. What really stands out to you after digging into all this?